keep in mind here. One, I'm neurodivergent with both autism and ADHD. I'm autistic. And I also have an extremely dynamic and vivid videography of a memory most of the time. Sometimes that ADHD kicks in and I really just miss it. And that's all right. I'm not perfect. And two, I'm a licensed therapist and I do work with couples. I'm a sex therapist. I work with PTSD, anxiety, and trauma and grief and all those things. So now that we've set the stage, I find myself reflecting upon my sessions. I normally like to figure out like why. Why is this session coming to mind? And I got totally engrossed in reminiscing in this one particular session that I was kind of reliving. And it reminded me how fantastic it is to be a therapist when you've developed a such a trusting relationship and bond with your clients. And they do say that 70% of the what determines the success of a client in mental health is the relationship they have with the therapist. It's not what they say, it's not what they do, it's how they make them feel. It goes right along with Maya Angelou there. So it was so beautiful reflecting upon this session with such a beautiful woman who is struggling with self-esteem and body image issues due to like several extremely unhealthy relationships, not really good parenting, in which, people pleasing tendencies, sometimes kick in. And, people don't always learn how to say yes, and they sure as hell don't learn how to say no. So it was absolutely beautiful when I was there. Start my morning with this vanilla leaning individual in the kink and fetish world and sex therapy. We would just say like, there's not much, kink or fetish that has ever really like come up or brought up. Me as a neurodivergent and kink affirming therapist that does sex therapy, it was so beautiful watching the light beaming out of every word as she was able to share about some of the most explosive orgasms that she has ever had in her life, doing things and feeling things in her body that she didn't know existed with somebody else that is definitely kinky and they definitely had a fetish. And she was so focused so much on trusting herself and experiencing her feelings and saying yes and saying no when needed. Me hearing about her first foot job and how awesome it was, the most comfortable sexual, sensual energy exchange with another human being that she has ever experienced. It was just beautiful and it fuels me with that fire to continue helping and doing this therapy exactly the way that I do it. Because when you help somebody get the right resources and you help them understand the mind, the body connection in their own nervous system, in the ways in which their own cognitive distortions develop, we teach them about the 7 different ways of self-care, including the physical, the emotional, the personal, the social, the spiritual, the space, and work. And then she's able to talk with me about what she felt, very specifically, where she felt it and how it felt. 2 adults talking about how it felt in her body, on her body, with his body, with his body in her body from several different angles, and how the sensual experience continued for hours with a stranger that made her believe that she is beautiful in every way. See, it's because she's believing that. And she is deserving of pleasure and peace in every way, whenever, wherever she wants it. Watching somebody transform into a beautiful butterfly, a butterfly that's flapping her wings for the first time and witnessing the first few flaps before she flies, knowing that she's going to fly. That's an amazing experience as a therapist. Too often in our society, especially with our generation and older cohorts, sorry, boomers, but they grew up in families and cultures that demonize talking about the human body and demonize talking about sensual and sexual experiences that we can share with ourselves, with other persons, just being willing and able and open and honestly being able to talk directly about these topics that other people unfortunately still cringe upon. It allows growth because the connection is real. In therapy, we call this attending. More than just leaning in, it's more than just repeating what they say. It's welcoming this person's existence and their experience to exist purely without judgment, without rejection, without moralistic disgust. No, just love and trust and acceptance. That's also part of breaking the evolutionary cycle of disgust, shame. You know, in history, it did help us avoid like getting rejected from our tribes in our villages that where we lived. You know, it ensured that our space at night was safe and that our space at the table was secure and that our portion of the shared meal was secure, that our villagers would watch our back and make sure that we weren't hurt because they were accepted. See, the modern misfire is when shame approaches the disgust, whenever it's turned inwards. Shame. Who are we to talk about another person's body? It's so harmful. You know, that's the same thing as racism. In fact, fat phobia derives from racism itself. It's a historical fact. If you care enough about being a good human, we all have smartphones. You can do your own research. Or you can just trust me, you know, because it's true. I've done the research. See, everyone is free to exist just as you are, and our parents did not do a good job of teaching us that. But as therapists, we get to show up and be the role model. We get to be the accepting one, and then we get to teach our clients how to do that for themselves so that they can learn to trust their gut. You know, the instinctual area of our body that gets triggered with disgust and anger and shame and many other core emotions and feelings. See, being loving, especially as a therapist, it's the opposite of disgust. And if you do it well enough, and if you do it consistently enough, they will learn how to do it too. Therefore, they now feel connected or intimate and close and compassionate and fond of themselves, which invites others from healthier villages that see all beauty in life as welcome into their lives. See, then that person starts to believe in themselves again. And then they're no longer afraid in their vulnerability and they feel safe and secure and competent and they feel convinced that they are beautiful and loved. And then it gives them a relief. It gives them the big release as well. Seriously, hearing somebody talk about their first foot job and the multiple mind blowing, earth shattering, wave making orgasms that she never knew existed in her own body. That's the fuel that keeps me going, keeps a lot of therapists going. The mind body connection, it's no joke. Man, I love my practice.